on the couch and I refused to get into that money conversation with him because I was just tired of it. It had been happening for years. He'd dangle financial carrots, and he turned to me and he looked at me and he said, "You are nothing without me." And it was in that moment, it was like something snapped inside of me. And I'm like thinking to myself, you have never believed in me. Never. It's always been you who has wanted to financially dictate my life. And you told me, go to university, get a good job. So I did that and I fucking hated it. And I would come home and cry. I used to be a primary school teacher. I would cry. And
right.
it was hard, you know.
I feel like we were just like sort of moving and grooving. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Curveball. Today's guest is Eloise Tomkins, and she has a story that might hit home for anyone who's ever felt trapped by someone else's version of success for them. After her dad had a stroke, Eloise faced a defining moment that forced her to take a hard look at the money stories she'd been living out, ones rooted deeply not in her own fears and expectations, but in her dad's fears and expectations. She realized that if she was going to create the life she wanted, she had to believe in herself, not just follow the path laid out for her. So Eloise, welcome to Curveball. I was telling her that you have the perfect curveball story because you started in one place, had curveball, and then ended up like in a whole new, completely different place that you had never imagined. So thank you for
so cool. And thank you for letting me share it. It's interesting because I think for a long time I realized this was my curveball, and that was really a pivotal moment in my life. And we were talking just before the show and you were kind of reflecting, it sounds like you were happy, but you're not as happy as you are now. And I'm like, that's so true. That curveball moment really took me on a path of average happy to seriously could not imagine life to be any better.
Right. Average. And you can tell, look at her outfit, you guys. You can tell people in shiny shirts are happy people. Like there's just no way around it. So tell us a little bit about what was going on and what happened with your dad and what happened that made you say, you know what, I'm going to do something, because you were like, I'm on this safe path. I know what to expect. And I'm going to take the road less traveled. In fact, I have to make my own road. So tell us what was going on.
So just to step back before that pivotal moment, because I think it's kind of contextual, my relationship with my dad has not been an easy one. And I think people can sometimes find that difficult because they think it should be a good relationship and you should put everything into that relationship with your parent, regardless of how they treat you, regardless of how they make you feel. And that was certainly something that was drilled into me by both of my parents. My parents have been separated for years, but my mom still put that expectation on me to have a relationship with my dad and care for him. And it's really interesting because I remember the day before my dad had his stroke, we'd had a fight. And that wasn't uncommon for us. And the fight was about money because, again, that wasn't uncommon for us because money was our currency of love, or money was my dad's currency of love. So he would very much use the topic of money as a way to maintain our connection. I'll give you money to fix car tires. I'll give you money to pay for your university degree. I'll give you money for things that were necessary. And I would take that up because, you know, that was our love. That was our love currency. He would never say, I love you, but he'd give me money until he would start getting resentful of the fact that he would give me money. And so I remember waking up really early one morning to the sound of my phone ringing, and I glanced at the screen and it was my dad. And a part of me was just like, are you fucking kidding? Because we'd had the fight the day before. I'm like, why the fuck are you calling me? You're just going to yell at me again, berate me. And so I contemplated not answering that call. And the daughterly duty kicked in, right? And I thought, oh, I better answer the call. I felt guilty for contemplating not answering. Answered the call, and it was my dad on the other end of the line. But instead of yelling at me, he was incoherent. I could not understand a word that he was saying. It was just mumbo jumbo. And I'm not a morning person at the best of times. And so having this call in the early morning that had come through from my dad speaking gibberish, I was just like, what the fuck is going on? I don't even know. And then I reckon it took me less than a minute. And it's interesting because these are memories that are firm in my mind, and I can just recall them because that fear I felt in my body was so strong. I realized that something was seriously wrong. So I hung up the phone, called an ambulance, and I was kind of talking to her. I'm like, oh, I think there might be something wrong with my dad. Oh, but I don't know if I want to send an ambulance down or not. And she said to me, sounds like your dad is acting very out of character. And I was like, oh, yeah, he is. And that's when I knew something was really wrong.
Right.
So we got an ambulance sent for him, and he got shuttled off to hospital, and it turns out he had had a stroke.
Oh my gosh. So it sounds so interesting because it sounded like you guys you had this sort of, a tricky relationship. And then when he was in trouble, like he called you for some reason.
Well, it's really interesting that he called because apparently, for context, my dad's okay. Like he's back at home now. He still has some speech difficulties and getting his words out in a way that I guess people can understand him clearly. So there's some language and communication difficulties, but he's able to live independently and whatnot. And he was able to kind of communicate to us at a point that he was just pressing buttons on his phone. He didn't know who he was contacting. Apparently he called one of my brothers by accident. Like he was just trying anything he could to reach someone, and he just landed on me. So it was it was wild.
So then, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine being in that panicky moment. So then he has a stroke. He comes home for rehab, right? And are you on point to take care of him then?
So thankfully,
it sounds like you're the only daughter.
I'm the only daughter, and there was a lot of pressure growing up to be that caretaker, to be you're the daughter, you're the child, you care for your parents.
Right.
And it was something, and I'd been to a lot of therapy over the years, and in part to explore the relationship with my parents, because there was that sense of you take care of them regardless of how they treat you. And my parents didn't treat me that great. And in a lot of ways, there was a lot of control, a lot of you, especially from my dad, you go to university, you get a good job, you work hard, and you don't spend money. So it was this really difficult thing of like, I had to follow this path. And his belief was men are the providers and women don't know what they're doing with money. And it was really evident because he would always tell me, you can't buy a home by yourself, you can't afford to do these things. And then I'd go on a holiday and he'd be like, oh, you're wasting your money going on a holiday. So there was a lot of backseat driving around my finances.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then I think it's one of those, I've done so much research. I'm just so fascinated by how we learn. And I was really keen on how we have these deep, deep, deep relationships with our parents, and something like that a parent could say to you when you're a little kid that, I would be in my 40s and be like, wow, like, how is this still affecting me? Like, this happened like when I was a child. And now I realize it's because like until you have critical thinking, your little brain is like an unmanned hockey goal. So anything your parents are talking about it's just like getting in. Like there's nothing blocking it. So Absolutely. It must be so interesting. So then he gets home from his stroke and he does not have this like stroke of like, he doesn't have like an epiphany, like, oh, I've been a curmudgeon for years and now I'm going to be like super cool. And oh my God, like, how did I not appreciate how amazing Eloise is? None of that happened, right? Like he had this stroke. And then at what point taking care of him, did you decide that, wait a second, I'm following his story and I'm not even living my own life. Like I know I'm living my own life, but it feels like I was doing it for him maybe. So what was it like to realize that? And then tell us what you did, because you made a big move.
Gosh, that's so interesting to reflect on. And, it's interesting because there was one moment, I remember one moment in the hospital when he looked across at me and he touched my hand and he had tears in his eyes and he was just like, oh, I can't remember what he said. I don't remember the words. I just remember like that moment where I felt like, wow, maybe you could change. And imagine if I had this father, but I didn't. And it was when he got home, like he was discharged, he was home, and then months later, so we're talking like a couple of months or a number of months later, he drove to my house and he was sitting on my couch. And I just remember being on the couch together and again remembering that our currency of love is money. And the conversation of money came up. And by this point, because he'd had a stroke, that had scared him. He really wanted to protect me financially. So I know that it came from a good place for him. And he was sitting on my couch telling me, how I needed to do this and that with my money. And I didn't know what I was doing and I had no savings. He had no idea, mind you, what was actually going on in my bank account. No idea. He was making stuff up because of his perception of what women are like with money versus what my brother, a man, is like with money.
Right.
We were sitting on the couch and I refused to get into that money conversation with him because I was just tired of it. Had been happening for years. He'd dangle financial carrots and he turned to me and he looked at me and he said, "You are nothing without me." And it was in that moment, it was like something snapped inside of me. And I'm like thinking to myself, you have never believed in me. Never. It's always been you who has wanted to financially dictate my life. And you told me, go to university, get a good job. So I did that and I fucking hated it. And I would come home and cry. I used to be a primary school teacher. I would cry. And it was hard,
Gosh, that is just, I just think about being a parent and how your job as a parent is to really to be there for your kids and then to hold it over and just say you'd be nothing. You're nothing without me, like active, like that's just such a hard. So then you were like, okay, so I did all these things and you never believed. So you had this massive epiphany in this moment. So then how did you decide that you were going to start your own business then? Because a lot of people don't go from, I have a crazy, like a job they would start to think about, okay, maybe I should start taking yoga or maybe I should, I don't know, like become vegan or something, right? But you're like, no, I'm going to start my own business. Well, you probably know, as I always like to say, when you start your own business, it is like just ongoing therapy. You learn so much about yourself, like so much about yourself. Starting your own business.
It is wild how much you learn.
So that's not like the first place people go. And so it must have felt like quite like a kick in the seat of the pants in some way to really, so it must have just been it sounds like such a bittersweet moment where you're just like, I see things so clearly now and I see how you never believed in me. And at the same time, you're simultaneously feeling, well, you know what, Dad? Like, this is like a movie. You know what, Dad? I believe in me. And so I'm going to do this, right? So you're having like both of these things happen at the same time. And then again, you're just like, well, I'm going to then do the next completely logical thing. I'm going to start my own business. So then
right?
Yes. You crazy, Eloise. Yes.
It's interesting. As I feel like I say, it's interesting because I hear it and I'm like, oh, wow. I guess it goes back to, we were talking about childhood, right? And for me, I remember being 16 and doing a business, unit at high school and loving it. But I remember being told back then by my teacher that I didn't take enough risks in business. And then
you're like, have you met my dad? Have you met my dad? Like, then you would understand. Right. Yeah, just
we don't take risks.
Yeah, you're like, you've met my dad at the parent-teacher conferences. That grumpy old guy.
Well, he wouldn't have, because my dad wouldn't have been there, right? Like, like he just never showed up. It was mum.
Oh, but then he had such a story.
Like it was crazy. Mum wasn't there either. So I raised myself essentially from 14 onwards, and but I wanted to do these things, but I was so scared. I was terrified, and the fear inside my body, like it was just holding me back. It was like this weight that was just holding me back, this weight, and also this like blackness, this heaviness. And I had been doing a lot of therapy, and the therapy had been great. It had really helped me get to that point. And so when my dad said that, it just was that thing that was underpinning our whole relationship the entire time, but he'd finally said it out loud. And I'm like, okay. I see it just so clearly now. It's laid out on the silver platter. And it was a journey to start my own business, because it wasn't as straightforward as Dad saying that and going, let's start my own business. It was kind of like this realization that I had followed the rules, and the rules suck. The rules keep me playing safe, and I know what the outcome of playing that game is going to be. And I decided, like,
I know we just met today for the first time, but just looking at you, you do not look like a rule follower. So did you look different? Did your hair look different? You probably would have never worn that shiny shirt, I'm thinking.
Probably not. No, maybe the shiny shirt, but definitely not the hair and the glasses, because I was so self-conscious. There was so many layers to myself and even my identity. Like from that moment, it was kind of like, oh, well, Dad told me that I should date men because men are the providers. It turns out I'm a lesbian. So add that to the mix of the rules, right? Because you get, and I just decided that I needed to lean into my body, because my body was telling me, you're not happy, or as happy as you could be. I was happy enough, but Eloise, did a lot of...
I just love that you're saying this about your body, because I've interviewed, probably a dozen people so far for Curveball. And one of the things I realized with my brain issue is my body was telling me stuff for years before I finally took action. And part of it you sort of explain away just because you're like, oh, that's sort of weird. But I realize now what it feels like to be operating in disequilibrium, because my brain was causing my muscles and my limbs to waste. So when I was exercising, it was like really hard for me. And then I would be like so just completely fatigued from it. And I would just say, oh, it's probably this, or it's probably this. And really, it was my body saying, hey, there's something. So now I know what that feeling feels like. So if I'm ever operating in that disequilibrium again, I'm going to know what it feels like to know, like, hey, I got to be paying attention to this. But I just think it's so interesting. Our body, how was your body telling you? You said, like, I would sort of feel this fear, but like, how did your body feel at that time that you're just like, this is not, there's something bigger here happening. Like, I got to really take bigger action.
It's interesting because kind of like you, I just thought that was how I was operating. It was just my normal. And I honestly thought that I was just going to be that way forever. And I just thought that was just me. Like I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I was not good enough. And I'm a psychologist, and I know I felt like I'm not good enough. Like that's a thought. That's not a feeling, right? But the feeling, when I was able to tease apart the feeling, it was fear and shame. And the fear and shame, like the shame sits in my throat personally, and it feels constricted, like I don't have a voice. And my fear kind of sits in my chest and in my stomach, and it really just felt like this black hole. And I did all the therapy. Like, I tell you what, I did therapy. I read the books that my therapist recommended. I read more books, and I did spiritual healing, sound bowl healing. I did all the things. Affirmation cards. Don't even start me on affirmation cards.
You're like, I have so many journals, like so many journals. Yeah.
Done all the things. And, and I was kind of like, what is missing? And then I was working as a psych by this point, and a psychologist, and was working with kids who had been really traumatized, and had the way that work operated, or the foundations behind that work, was really understanding their brain development and how the brain processes trauma. But it's not like, when we talk about the brain, it's not our thoughts, but our brain holds kind of everything, all of the senses that we experience in our body, all of the sensations, all of the information. It goes through our nerves all the way up to our brain, which then interprets that information and then sends out, responses in our body. And so I was learning a lot about that, and I learned that trauma is stored in our body. And I talk about trauma in a way that's not just these big life-changing events that's a one-off that happens. It can be like that you were talking about, that comment from a parent when you're a kid that you think and you go, why is that even popping up in my mind right now? Like, that's a nothing comment. But as a child who hasn't developed that critical thinking, we can't.
I used to think that trauma, like that I didn't have it because people had it so much worse than I did. Right. And then I just thought trauma is just something that happens that just makes you feel something has changed in the world, that like part of the world has become unsafe for some reason. And now I know that I had a lot of trauma, growing up. And I know what you're saying, like with the energy, like energetically, like how it's stored. And I just totally get it, because I was working with a trauma coach, and she was like, your nervous system is so, because I get this reaction, like I'll start to cry. Like, I'll be very affected by something. Like, I can be very easily hurt is one of my things. And if I get that feeling, I can cry for like days and days and days on end. And it's a very pure cry. Like, it feels like it's something that I know has been like that's very, very tender inside of me. And then understanding that, no, that's a trauma response, like that. And so I get that energy. And the reason that energy feels so pure is because it's like little 6-year-old Heather, like having this reaction inside of like grown up, rational minded adult Heather, who's trying to figure out, why am I acting like this? But I know now that your nervous system is so far. So when one of my kids like is, experiencing anxiety or something, I'm like, oh, I just know their nervous system is ahead of them right now. Like, it is so interesting. And then your body just follows then, and it's just, so it is that mind. There is like, and I've learned this just rebuilding and growing my muscles back, like your mind and your body can really, I know they've been saying, like all the philosophers and, motivational people are always, no, like your mind and body, but your mind has so much control. And I was just like, oh yeah, of course I know that. But like having a brain deficit and then having it fixed, like, you know what I mean? I'm experiencing it myself. So of course I don't want anyone to have a brain aneurysm to be able to experience this, but it is super cool. And then you use these mind body techniques to help people get in touch with money. Like, we haven't even talked about like budgeting. Like, I don't know. How do you work with people? Like, this is such a novel approach to money, is that you think like paying attention to your body, is not the first beat. Your body, I think people think, oh, I got a budget. I got to save a certain percent. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this again. Because somebody tells us, most often, a lot of times not our parents, we learn from people who aren't even qualified to give money advice, quite honestly. Was your dad any of the things that he wanted you to be? Like, was he a university graduate who worked hard?
Oh, well, no, my family was not. I was in my immediate family, the first person to have gone to university. So I know that all of his beliefs came from pushing
Right.
me, came from a good place. He wanted better for me. And I get that,
Right.
and so
He had a
it's,
fear, like he was coming at it from a place that like just it sounds like total lack. Like
yeah, absolutely. And I get it. However, it's interesting because the way that he approached our relationship has actually pushed me away, because I'm my own independent person. And you're right, his fear, and interestingly, research shows that we do inherit fear. Like it is passed down through generation to generation. And one of the reasons why I got into money is obviously my dad. Like, I always wanted wealth. I would see my parents arguing about money as a kid, and I always wanted it. And not for the money, but like money can bring freedom, money can bring opportunity, money can bring safety and choice. And I want that. I want to,
right.
I was talking with a friend and she's like, yeah, I like money because when my toilet breaks, I can call a plumber and I don't have to worry about whether or not I can get it fixed because I've got the money. I know that I can get it fixed. I'm like, that
Right.
is what I want. And that's what I want for other people too. But the emotions in our body, and I love you sharing your experience, and it's a really interesting one where, and I'd love to hear more about it another time, but it's interesting because people do talk about the mind and, oh, your mind has so much control. No, wrong. 95% of what we do operates from our subconscious. 95% of the things that we're doing day to day operate from our subconscious. We're not even aware of it. We think we are, but we're not. And it's funny because I see it play out with people, myself included. Well, actually, I don't see it
Oh,
play
well,
out with
I just
myself.
know when I leave my neighborhood and how many times I turn out of my neighborhood the way that I'm used to going
Yeah.
most often that I make a wrong turn and I'm just like habit. Like, but that's so true. Like there are lots of times I'm driving, don't call the police on me, but there are lots of times I'm driving that I'm like, have I even been paying attention? Like,
And look, a lot of the times our subconscious is really helpful, right? Because imagine if we had to think about every single decision that we were making every single day. Like, it'd
right,
be exhausting. But the problem with that is, for me in my life, I was living on autopilot, following the good girl rules, following, this is what I need to be doing with my life. And I wasn't actually thinking about and listening to my body. And I guess that was another pivotal point for me because I realized, well, I was unintentionally playing the victim. Life was happening to me. I was letting other people, my dad, dictate my choices. And
right,
that moment kind of made me realize, well, who do I want to be? What do I want to be? How do I want to be that? And then I came across the mind body techniques like somatic work, EMDR. Oh my goodness, game changer. And that emptiness and that black hole, that void, that heaviness, that all started to shift. And I was like, oh my God, it doesn't have to be that way for me. And I
right.
never believed it could be possible. And that's how
That's
I got to my
amazing.
business.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about EDMR because obviously I'm not a psychologist, but I do love reading about psychology in the brain and the body. And I did read the book, The Body Keeps a Score.
Mm.
And out of all the modalities, and it's written by the doctor who legitimized this idea of PTSD. So it's a
Mm.
fascinating read. And that is the book that led me to believe, oh, wait, every human being on this planet has trauma. Like
Yeah.
there are different things that happen to different people, but everyone has it. Like no one, you're
Yeah.
not going to live, you're not going to be able to not, I mean, you're going to have trauma in your life. And so, but one of the things that he said out of all the modalities, I mean, therapy, ayahuasca, like everything, he was like EDMR. If you're reading that book, I think it's chapter 15. Just like
Oh, I love that you know
seriously.
what chapter it is.
Yeah, because I was just like, everyone just needs to read this one chapter because it's all about EDMR. And it is such an interesting way to, because what we're talking about is rewiring the neural pathways, right? That you had this
Yeah.
good girl pathway and you're just like, you can't call yourself a bad girl. Like what do you call yourself if you're not a good girl? Like you're a great woman, like an
Right.
amazing rich woman. Like, I'd be curious to
In
know.
a millionaire. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. It's funny because I don't relate to that anymore. I'm a disruptor, you
Oh,
said the hair
love that. Yes.
and I've always been, I always have been. It just hasn't been celebrated.
I just loved
Nobody celebrated it.
how this queer disruptor was like literally trapped inside this
Yeah.
shell of a daughter that do you just feel like just a sense of just freedom just to now like you sort of like busted open, you broke open the shell and now you're just like I feel free of all constraints.
Yes and no. Yes, absolutely, in so many ways. There's also a grief for the life that could have been. And there's also sometimes, there's still that fear that comes up. And I think that and this is the work that I do with people around money as well, is that it's ongoing, and business as well, personal development 101, or not even 101, it's probably advanced, like physics level personal development, running a business. But I guess it's being aware now, and because that has been cracked open, and it's kind of a light shining from my crown, and I am who I am, and I no longer care. I no longer look to my family for approval. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do me, and I'm sharing this story about me. It's my story and my experience of it, about my family, and that before I would never have been able to do because, oh my goodness, what would they think? Now I'm like, I am who I am, and if it offends people that happen to be in my family, well, so be it.
Right. That's a really courageous stand too in a family like that. I have a good friend who is an author and she helps people write memoirs, and I was like, gosh, I would love to write a memoir, but I wouldn't want to do anything to upset my family. Like there is still that very strong like control element. And she said that she has people she works with who are like, they were only child. Everyone is dead in their family. Their parents are dead and they're still afraid to tell this story because they're still afraid. Because that goes deep. So it's not, and one of the things that I think you said too that is really resonant with me is, and something that another guest said on Curveball, which is, it's not like you're going to like solve this, right? Like even if someone works with you, right, they're going to see changes in their life, but like then they have to keep on doing it. So one of my other guests, he's super into martial arts, and he's like, you got to do the reps when you're out of the chaos. Like it's easy to make change when you're feeling like, oh no, something has happened. Like he had a big health issue happen. And so he's like, of course you make all these changes in the moment. He's like, but then when you get better, he's like, that's when that kind of work. That's when you got to stick with it. He's like, that's when the real change happens. So I like too that it is an ongoing thing. What is something that you would like the most surprising or unexpected shift you experienced once you started rewriting your story around money? Like, and how did it impact other areas of your life? That just like, what was the first money shift where you were just like, wait a minute, I'm shifting. Like, I think we all know what it's like when we have those, like you make it. Well, when you make the intention to change and then you change and you're in the moment of changing. Like one of the things I remember is I was like, I'm not going to like be so reactionary. Like that was something that I was really focusing on. And then I remember the first time that I was very calm and and I'm like, oh, I'm doing it. Like it's happening. And, like that's a thrilling moment. But tell me about what was the first thing that you were just like, all right, this is working.
Oh, I love that. Because you're right. It is so the behavior change, isn't it? And that's why I got so frustrated with that thought-based work, because I was you, right? I had behaviors that I wanted to change, and I did the therapy. I could understand them. I could articulate them until the cows came home, and then put me in that moment where I'd be triggered and I would behave in a way that would leave me feeling super frustrated.
Right.
And again, it's that body-based work of being able to EMDR, doing that processing work, which is so powerful because it helps neutralize those emotional triggers, which then help you not get into that behavior in the first place. And
Right.
I think for me, behavior around money was when I first started my business and charging for my services, because you coming from a salary job, right, where you just get paid your same however many dollars per fortnight or whatever, and then going into your business where it's like you need to be the one having sales conversations, telling people your prices, sharing that information with them, having people say, ugh, no, and then
Right.
separating worth from money, because I think that's a huge
Oh, yeah.
thing that people experience.
I agree. Well, I see it all the time because I really like to help people. That's why I like branding so much, is the whole idea of branding is that you create reliable results for people, right? And then they can really, and that consistency and reliability is so important to your brand, because that's, because people can count on you. And that's conceivably the idea behind that, is that you can charge a premium because your experience is so reliable. And that is worth something. But I do see those money blocks happen all the time. And I see women, especially for no reason at all, discounting their pricing. And so there's an equity pay gap in Ohio. That's where I'm from originally, in America. But there's an equity pay gap in America between men and women. It's 28%. And I was so curious. I wonder how many women, if there's a correlation between female-owned businesses versus male-owned businesses and the equity pay gap. And can I tell you, it correlates exactly. So even when women have a chance to charge, they're still discounting because it's so ingrained. I think that there's this societal narrative too about promotion and that kind of stuff. Like in America, it's like from the time you're just a little peanut. Yes. Everyone tells you like, oh girl, you got it. You claim it. Like, this is fine. But society also tells you girls don't brag, and you don't do anything to make yourself one. You can't be above anyone. You also can't be below anyone. It's like there is a narrative, because I see the real friction, and
absolutely.
Like the number of women that I work with who are just like, I got to talk to my husband about spending this money. And I'm like, that's a hangover from that.
Oh my God. It's absolutely wild. And it fascinates me, to be honest. And again, disruptor, right? That's why I am so passionate about the work that I do, because I want women to take up that space. I want them to make money. And the reason I want to be a money mindset coach, right? Is because you know what? I already have a relationship where my family is a little bit, dysfunctional, and I am already a disruptor. Like, I'm a queer woman who doesn't have a strong relationship with her family. So why not be me that steps out onto the stage and is like, you know what, fuck this. It can be done. Let me show you how, so that you can do it too. And that's what I want to inspire people is, and it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to do it because you've got to undo a lot of conditioning, but it can be done.
It can totally be done. Like you can do things. Like when my kids were little, they would say, oh, I can't do this, right? Is what they would say. And I would say, let's think of all the things you were not able to do. Like you weren't able to ride a bike. You weren't able to go to the bathroom by yourself. It's like all these things, because we do have this track record of success. So anytime I feel like I can't do it, I'm just like, Heather, just remember that you did not flush one of your headphones down the toilet today. Like, it's like we do. It's like, it's easy to sort of fall into that fear. And sometimes people are there's such a narrative around this is scary, or it's just because it's uncomfortable. It's something we haven't done before. But I just know with starting your business that, I get it that people freak out about their, putting themselves out there and promoting. But the thing is the only way through is through. Like, you're not going to be nervous about money or marketing and read books and look at it from the sideline. And then all of a sudden, just one day, have command over it. Like, it
Yeah.
starts because you start taking different action. So like, what is the
Yeah.
first step? Like when you're working, cause I'm sure people are probably nodding along, just being like, I have a twisted relationship with money. So like when you think about those old narratives, right? Because what is like the first step you'd recommend to having people like untangle those beliefs?
The very, very first step is awareness. And so I guess by
Yes.
listening to this podcast, and if you're nodding along and going, wow, actually, yeah, and some people might be listening going, oh, I've never really thought about my relationship with money. In that case, think about it.
Right.
First step, start thinking about it.
Wait, I it doesn't get much more simple than that. I've never really thought about my relationship with money. Well, then think about it. I love that. That's like
But it's like we don't, right? And that's
right.
why I love the work that I do, because to me it's so simple. And I
Right.
forget that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's dive into your subconscious. But then some people are like, oh, crap, I have a relationship with money? Huh. Oh. But then other people might be listening and going, oh, yeah, I already know that my relationship with money is not that great. I know
Right.
that I'm not charging. And so for them, I would kind of think, well, okay, what is getting in the way? What stories are getting in the way of you increasing your prices? What are you scared
Right.
of? Because underlying that, there's going to be fear. And if we can untangle, what are you actually scared of? Because it's not about increasing your prices. That's not the fear.
No.
And for that, I love a little bit of like journaling, to kind of unpack what's going on. Also,
Right.
a little shameless plug for my podcast as well, Rich Woman Rising, because in that
Yes.
we do help women kind of unpack some of those things that are getting in the way of creating the wealth that you're wanting in your business, and understanding why,
Totally. Yes.
why and what's going on for you.
I love that name. I actually got goosebumps when you said that, Rich Woman Rising. I love that because money is very tricky and it's really emotional. I'm very into like what the ego mind wants us to do. And money, the ego is probably just like, oh yeah, money. Yeah. Because it's finite. You know, when you have a lot of it, you know, when you don't have a lot of it. And it is so interesting. Like one of the biggest things that, two of the biggest things that have sort of changed my relationship with money. One was really understanding, when did I know money mattered? Like that was, someone asked me that question and I was like, well, that's a really good question. So I knew money mattered when my parents got divorced because everything became about money. And then my dad was a stockbroker and oversaw like the IPO of Wendy's hamburgers. So all of a sudden he had some money and we had no money. Like it was just so interesting. And then the second one was not what do I want, but like this is from one of my other coaches. This was like this question literally I just cannot stop thinking about it. She's like, not what do you want, but who do you need to be to receive that? And I was just like, what? Like because I really think about like, if you say like, okay, I want to have a 7-figure business, what does 7-figure Eloise? You probably already do, Eloise. That's amazing. But let's say you want to have like you're just like, yes, I do. So let's say you want like an 8-figure business, right? 8-figure Eloise is going to show up different than $600,000 Eloise. And so that's the question that I looked at is like, what does 7-figure Heather look like? Well, 7-figure Heather has support. Like, so I hired a VA. Like I did things that I would have that I would have put off or kept on deferring. And I was like, no, that I'm going to start taking those actions that a 7-figure CEO looks like. So my friend has this goal. She wants a 9-figure business. She wants to start a media empire. And so I am just like,
that.
Yeah, but she's like, there's a 9-figure Jessica who is very different from the 7-figure Jessica. And I'm just like, and you can get really excited around that. And then I feel like,
100%.
I don't know.
I call that,
you remove those. Yeah.
I call that the inner millionaire, absolutely, or the inner billionaire, whatever floats your boat. But I absolutely agree with you, because it's the mind. And the reason I love that, and I embody that, and it's something I do every morning, every day, before I have to make a decision. Okay, what would my inner millionaire do? How would she, and I take it like, I actually did this in my Millionaire Mindset Academy recently. And it's funny because one of my clients was like, like I do this, but I don't do it as deep as you did. And she's like, wow. It's like she was shocked because I took it deeper, because we need to really embody it. Like, what is your inner millionaire or your 7-figure self? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they wearing? Who are they
Right.
with? What are they like? Where are they? Are they in the same house that you're in right now? Are they going on the same holidays? How are they feeling in their body? Are they making decisions from that place of having that weight inside of them? Or are they feeling calm and secure and confident in their decision, knowing that they've already achieved the success? Like, can you imagine the clients that are in your world at 7 figures and bringing all of that to mind? And if that feels really hard to tap into, that's understandable. So maybe bring it back. Maybe you might need to bring it to, okay, what would my 6-figure self look like?
Right.
What would my $200,000 self look like? You can break that version of you down so it doesn't need to be so far ahead.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think that there's just never been a time that I've not posed that question that it has not inspired, not from fear, but like from an exciting, motivating place inside. That's the difference. Like, it's like, ooh, well, I'm going to do this. And I sort of have that excited feel, that spark of feeling, because I'm like, oh, I'm doing something. And it feels like, I don't know, a little exciting, a little like not naughty, but a little naughty too. Like there's some element to it that's just, it's fun. I have this inside secret that I know I'm doing things differently too. And it's like everything I've learned in just spiritual healing, like just understanding myself in relationship to other people, understanding like going through something significant this year. Every single action I took in and of itself it's not that hard or difficult. Like I had a practice that I created to stay present if I started to get really ahead of myself. And it's like this little secret that I have that I'm just like, and doing it came so naturally. It works. It has a 100% success rate in helping to like help me really feel the emotion and then calm myself down. So it's like super complete. And I'm just like, it wasn't even hard. Like that's sometimes too that I think people think sometimes like making big change, it has to be, oh, well, I mean, obviously that's why New Year's is so effective. Oh, well, we're hitting a weekend. Well, on Monday, I will start to become this completely different person. And it really does not work that way. It starts like you just have to do one small thing.
I love that so much. Yeah. Fun fact, most New Year's resolutions, I can't remember the statistics, but most people don't actually succeed with their New Year's resolutions because they're trying to be like, the problem with that is we're trying to change behavior. And the thing with behavior is that we think that thinking about them is enough. We think that by telling ourselves, oh, okay, on Monday, I'm going to eat healthy. And it's like, okay, but if you could do that, then you would have done it. But how are your emotions? How are you, how are you actually feeling in your body? Because when you reach for that cookie, it's not because your brain is, it's not because of your thoughts. It's not because of what you're thinking, because you're probably sitting there going, don't eat the cookie, don't eat the cookie. But your emotion is what actually is driving you to reach for the cookie.
Yes.
The sadness, the guilt, the fuck, I'm tired and I've had a really long day, overwhelm. That's what drives. And, it's funny talking about this because I was working with a client and she would say to me like, Ellie, I can't stop spending money. I know that I don't want to be doing it and I want to invest back into my business. And I've just gone and bought an $8,000 object that I don't need, that I'm going to go put in my closet because I'm not going to actually use it because I feel too guilty because I shouldn't have spent the money, but I couldn't stop myself because it's not driven by rational thought. It's driven by our body.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This has been the most enlightening conversation around money and mindset that I've had, because a lot of it is around affirmations. A lot of it is around budgeting. And if we already have I don't know how I feel about this kind of relationship with money, those kinds of things, you can say a million times, I'm a millionaire. But if your brain, I just tell you, you're just like, no, but if your brain is just like, no, you're not. Look, you have like $63 in your checking account. You are not a millionaire. That affirmation is never good. And it's not even your words, like, too. So it's like you're taking someone else's idea and trying to like force it in to this really complicated system. But that I also want to just say, it's just once you have, I don't know if I read this or if I made up this quote, but either way, it's a good one. Awareness is the only prerequisite for accomplishment. I mean, once you're aware, and it's never been the idea of taking a hard look at my tough things or things that have caused, moments of, where I had a very weird relationship with money, and I avoid, oh God, the way I avoided it. I told my husband, I said, I can actually pull all of my numbers from my accountant and actually not look at a single number. Like I said, I can go into my bank account and actually never even look to see, and I can do business in there. And I'm like, I'm not even gonna look to see. Like, that's how I was so avoidant. And then when I finally decided to take a look, it's never been as scary. There's never been anything that I thought was scary that I was like, God, you should have put this off longer because this is so horrible. I'm always just like, first of all, it's never as bad as I think it's going to be. And then you have awareness, and then it's all of a sudden just like, okay, I only have $63 in my checking account. You gotta watch it. It's never been it's just not as scary. I just want to reassure people if they're just like, this feels scary. Once you take a step out into what feels like you're stepping off a ledge, I promise for the vast majority of people, there's still going to be more ledge there,
Oh, of course, you're not going to fall off. And, I say to my clients as well, like, I like that analogy. And the ledge that I was thinking was a diving board, because I kind of use the analogy, like, we don't throw a baby into the deep end of the pool when they can't swim.
No.
We take it to the shallow end and we see how it feels around water, hence awareness, right? And some babies don't want to go any further and they just stay in the shallow end, right? Some people do that with their relationship with money. Some people, they're like, oh, I know, I don't want to go there because it feels too overwhelming, and they just stay there. Other people are like, let's learn how to swim. And then they're going to jump off the diving board into the deep end, and they've got it. They're the ones who do the work, and they're the ones who go on to create a really successful business. And I don't talk about success as just monetary. Money, yes, but I know lots of 7-figure plus business owners who have the money, but their cash flow is behind the scenes terrible, because they don't know how to hold it because they're fearful. So
yes. Well, I know a lot of people who are 7-figure like online entrepreneurs, and they'll have, you hear all the highlights like, oh, I had a 7-figure launch, but they're actually not even profitable because they have so much overhead or something, but like, so it's so interesting too, because there is like such this, again, the narrative, like, oh, this person, did this, they had this 7-figure, like, I have a really good friend who's in the knitting business, and during COVID, her business, like a lot of those just like did amazing, and she has sustained it, which is even more incredible. But you look at her and you're just like, oh my God, she would have this like $200,000 launches, and people would just be like, oh my gosh. And I was like, you guys, she's been doing this for 15 years. Like, she is not new on the scene. Like, she's been doing this for a long time too. So a lot of times people who are successful, well, most times it doesn't come out of the blue. Like, people have been doing something for a long time beforehand too. So, that's 100%. Why I think it feels like sudden when entrepreneurs come into money, because in reality, we've probably been working on this for quite some time, and we have a lot. And when we remove those blocks, it all of a sudden opens up floodgates. So how can people, okay, so you have a podcast, you have a course. How can people, if they're just like, I'm all about Eloise or Ellie, and I want to work with her, how can they get in touch with you? What can they do? Where do they start?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. I hang on Instagram. I like Instagram. It's fun. So you can come give me a follow on there if you want to check me out. The other resource that I would recommend is if you are kind of listening to this episode and going, oh my goodness, I think I might have a money block and you want to learn more about it, I have a quiz that helps people understand what their money block is or what their predominant money block is so that they can start to get a little bit more understanding of it, because we haven't really spoken about this. So I'm not going to go into it too much now, but it really helps identify what that piece of the puzzle might be for you. Like we've spoken, I guess, a lot about the worthiness block, which is certainly one of them. So yeah, if you're curious about your money block, go and take the quiz. That'll be a really good resource.
And we'll put the link in the show notes too. Eloise Tomkins, this has been fascinating. I could literally hang on for several more hours. I'm already trying to figure out how do I bring you into a guest to my program, Radical Branding, because we have a whole module on refining your offer and setting your premium pricing. And sometimes but I know the power of it too, because we also look to say like, people are this is the most I could possibly charge. And then I'm like, what's even something higher like you could offer? And what's so interesting is it's hugely uncomfortable for people to even, but I'm like, no one even needs to know. But what's so interesting is, let's say you have 5 things. Like I had a student who she loves chocolate and she uses chocolate as therapy. So she teaches people how to work with chocolate. And then she really wanted to, like, there's all this stuff with fair trade chocolate. And she was sponsoring this farm in Africa. And she wanted to take people to this farm in Africa. And the idea of doing that when we started working together, because it would have cost, she was going to charge people $7,500 to go on this trip and this experience. And she was just like, there's no way. Can I tell you, just because we had it mapped out and she knew like where it fell, like in her business, she ended up it was something that she was like, if I do this within 5 years, I'll be just thrilled. She did it within 18 months. She had that high ticket offer out in the market.
I love that.
And it was because she could visualize it, and she could visualize what the experience was like. She knew why it was worth that amount of money. And it was just like, it's one of those cool things when you map it out. So money is good. Like money's good. And it's okay to say that, to also think that money is a good thing too. There are
money is good. Money is good. Money is great. And, in terms of another thing that listeners can do, thinking about that, what can they do now? Say that out loud. I like money. Money is good.
Yeah.
And see how that feels in your body. Because if your body clamps up or gets tense or gets tight or you feel uncomfortable in some way, there's a money block there.
Right. Totally.
That's my jam to kind of like work with. But yeah, pricing, that is such a big one. Like it's, oh my gosh. It's funny. I know we're finishing up, but you've made me think of pricing in that. Like, I remember working with clients, multiple clients. This is not just a one-time thing. And they would say to me, Ellie, I really didn't want to work with X client. So what I did is I tripled my prices in an attempt to push them away through my pricing.
And then they bought. Yes.
And then they bought.
Yes.
They were like, what? Why? I tripled my prices. Surely this would mean that they'd stop working with me. And I'm like, well, maybe you actually have been undercharging this entire time.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh. That is so awesome. I've enjoyed every minute of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope this episode has been valuable for everyone who's listened.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Me included. Thank you.